Fatima?
I just started Witcher 3.
Oh, nice.
And it is huge. I didn't know what I was in for.
Yeah. It's great. And you're just now starting. What got you to do it? Like, it's, I don't know if heyday's right, but the time when it's largest amount of interest is well past. What got you into it?
Well, I ate all of the Audible series, so I listened to all the books, watched the show, knowing it came out. It's just the current world that I'm wormholing into. So, game next.
Matt?
It was my girlfriend's birthday yesterday, so we dove into Luigi's Mansion 3.
Nice.
But I just started another game called In Other Waters that is like an indie. It's kind of like Subnautica, but 2D. I don't know how to explain it. It's also like a puzzle game, but it's been really fun.
Very nice. Joe?
When you say media,
books, like movies, like so whatever.
I read every day. I'm rereading Crisis on Infinite Earths and all the DC stuff from Identity Crisis on up. The only other media is really my wife and I are working through the early Curb Your Enthusiasms. So other than that, I work. So media. I play the same old games I've been playing, which is Free Cell every day. So at least a half an hour. So we'll throw out shout out to Free Cell. So.
Nadia?
Can you repeat the question?
What kind of media have you been consuming here lately?
Facebook, Instagram.
So no movies, no books, no video games? No?
Video games, I do play NBA 2K.
All right.
I played Pac-Man at the grocery store the other day.
Did you wash your hands after?
Yeah. You go down the aisle, you see the other person, you run away, and that's
okay. All right.
The meta game.
Yeah.
Nice.
My wife and I started Tiger King. Was it 2
boy.
nights ago? We haven't even gotten to the second episode, but since everyone's doing it,
it's not worth
why
it.
not?
It's a train wreck. It's a train wreck and not worth it.
Oh, I believe that. Right after the first episode, it's like everyone's wrong here. Everyone is wrong. Some people are slightly less wrong, but everyone is wrong.
The only thing that came out of it was the Game of Thrones memes that mix the characters. Shows you which is which, and it ends just about as badly as Game of Thrones did. So,
all right. I don't think we're gonna get too obsessed over it. Like I said, it was 2 nights ago we watched the first episode. Last night we spent time playing. My wife is playing some mobile game. I don't even know what it is, but it's a wait timer. And while I was playing some Assassin's Creed Odyssey, different things but beside each other.
Hey, Al, I'm so sorry, but I'm having a little bit of a work emergency. I've got to step out. My GM needs to call me.
Okay.
But I'll check out this. Should I come back in or just go? I can. I'll let you know, Dakota, when I jump back on. Okay. I'm so sorry about this. Okay. Thank you.
So we're about 5 minutes in. We were waiting for the moderator, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that Daniel?
Oh, that's Nadia, right? Are you moderating?
Yes, that's me.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Nice. The questions I have are, what is your job? And what are your day-to-day tasks?
Kind of same order. I'm just doing it from my screen. Dakota.
Sure.
Well, they just switched places. So Dakota, Joe, Matt, and then me. Are you guys
Sounds
good with
good.
that?
Dakota.
All right, sounds good. So I am a senior developer at Primal-Screen, which means I am writing code pretty much all day. making the internals of our games work, hunting down bugs when they don't work, and playing around with prototyping new features. A lot of our websites or games are web-based, and we do a lot of work for children's entertainment like PBS Kids and Sesame Street and things like that. So there's a lot of fun stuff, fun projects we get to work on.
Okay. Matthew?
Yeah. So I'm a sound designer and a new owner of a company called Mixabit. We just do any and all audio post-production, production. Right now I'm partnered up with Wabi Sabi Sound that's here in Atlanta. And we're working on a game called Scavengers that is based out of Washington. Midwinter Studios is making that. And so my day-to-day is just anything. I help support the team. That can be anything from going out and recording sound effects, getting them in the game, to fixing bugs and stuff. We're fully integrated in the team. So any and all audio support.
Okay. Can I get Joey?
Sure, it's just Joe. I'm going to call.
No? Okay.
There's two people from my high school that call me Joey, and allowed to get away with it. But Joe's fine. I am the Joe of Puzzles by Joe, and I am arguably the most successful solo indie dev in Atlanta. I've been doing it for 11 years and self-supporting, and my Clutter series is still selling more each year. It's been a joy, and it's actually on iPad and mobile now through iWin's All Access program, and that's looking like a nice little chunk as they gear up and with that service. I do whatever it takes to get the next game out. And the last couple of years, I've been in Unity and trying to get the games out quicker and quicker. My typical day can range from doing some programmer art that actually does stay in the game, to coding, to level design, to testing, to writing what's laughingly called a story that goes with the game. And that's it, because I'm a puzzle guy stuck in a game dev world. But again, I do whatever it takes. I took on not an apprentice today, but a guy that got laid off from his work about a month ago, and I decided to take him on for at least 10 hours a week, trying to just have him help me get out, the games quicker, etc. So, it changes on a daily basis. That's it. I'm done. I'm done rambling. Zane's turn.
Zane?
So my name is Zane Everett. I'm the vice chair for the Atlanta chapter of the International Game Developers Association. That is a volunteer position where I help to organize different types of events and kind of get general knowledge out for how to get into the game industry. Before, the day-to-day to that was kind of facilitating with convention owners and different meeting spaces that are game developer related. That has changed a lot recently. We're trying to figure out how to do some online connection stuff. The first one that's kind of being rolled out is the Athens Game Jam. I'll post a link to that a little bit later in the conversation, but that's the day-to-day for that. But the way that I make money is I own a company where I contract out my services for programming, although here lately it's been a whole lot less of programming, and my primary contract right now, I've been a producer for a title that is about to ship. I can't talk a whole lot about the subject itself beyond that it is a training simulation for light rail vehicles. In the day-to-day for that, I have moved away from a lot of programming tasks and a lot more towards scheduling people and seeing what the product needs to finish, figuring out how to put teams together to get a specific task accomplished, whether it's smaller individual tasks or like company-wide stuff that is needed. Like we are trying to shift towards having a dedicated automated unit testing team, and trying to teach some of our QA engineers how to become programmers in that sense. It does vary a lot from day to day, but the biggest thing that seems pretty common is managing people and what their needs and expectations are to be able to get things done, and what the company's needs and expectations are out of those people.
Okay. How did you know what job you wanted after college? Dakota.
Cool. I guess the short answer is that I really didn't, and my advisor definitely kind of pushed me toward a particular role. But the closest direction that I had is I found a company that did really interesting work, and I actually went to school for graphic design and got into programming and development stuff later, and even after joining Primal-Screen, transitioned from web development to more game development kind of stuff. So it was really fun, like saying this company does really cool work. It seems to have a really great culture, and the people are there are people I want to work with. And then kind of figuring out the things I like doing and the best role after the fact. But yeah, I also wouldn't have gotten that job if my advisor hadn't steered me away from a potentially bad decision and said, you should definitely apply for an internship here and try to get a job at this company that I know you really want to work for and you won't admit to yourself.
Okay, Zane?
So I knew what I wanted to do well before college. I knew by 4th grade that I wanted to make games. And I spent much of my time in school throughout middle and high school dedicated towards that. I went to DeVry for game and simulation programming. I went to UGA for artificial intelligence. And as soon as I was done with UGA, I went straight into the industry. I think one thing that separates me a little bit from others is I've always been very interested in the intersection of video games and education. And I did strive pretty hard to make that my first job, where I worked at Cogent Education, which was a company that made educational games for high school biology. I think my biggest deal with educational games, though, is that many of them are just not good. And so that drives people away. And so what I was really dedicated to is working for a company that made high quality, good games that led people to learning because they enjoyed what they were playing. So.
Okay, Matthew?
I'm kind of similar to Zane. I knew I wanted to do something audio, music or sound related for a long time. And I was lucky enough that the school I went to, SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design, had a sound design program. So once I got in there, the kind of avenues narrowed into, film, or, what we would call linear audio, and then non-linear audio, which is making games and apps and websites and stuff like that. So I saw that was the future, and kind of just went with that, took a chance. And I just started applying to game companies and audio studios from there. So yeah, I kind of knew what I wanted to do and just kept pursuing that.
Joe?
So I have a different story. I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I hated the fact that my math teachers in high school couldn't answer what I thought were relatively simple questions. So instead of going to a teaching college, I went to an engineering college to study math. And I took one computing course where it was old, I'm so old, it's key punch days. And you had to wait 3 days to find out you missed a semicolon. And I was bored. I aced it. I actually taught other people, and I couldn't understand how really smart people couldn't grok programming. Because it was always simple for me. It was like, hey, there's a light switch, you hit the switch, the light comes on. That's how easy programming was for me. but 3 days waiting to get, feedback. And I wanted to work with people. And I didn't think at the time, I naively thought that, you didn't work with people when you work with computers, which is just silly. And all I cared about at the time, other than trying to, work towards becoming a teacher at some point, was being self-sufficient and self-supporting. And I ended up my last 2 years of college working for UPS 20 hours a week part-time. And back then it was actually really good pay and was good. So when I graduated, I didn't look for a job because my math degree meant I could become an actuary, which really sounded horrible, boring, or I could try to go to grad school, because I basically took no statistics, nothing useful. The computer course was about the only useful thing. Everything else was abstract math. Anyways, 2 years later, I was working on a teaching degree, and they had replaced the key punch with CRTs, these little green screen guys. And I was helping a friend of mine debug a program. And when I fixed her program and hit the enter key and got the response immediately instead of 3 days later, the tongue fell out of my mouth and I went, this is what I want to do for a living. And I was a business programmer for 3 years, and about 9 years in, I decided to learn C. And I actually decided on games because I'm a puzzle guy and I wanted to have something interesting to do while learning C. And I was still thinking of myself as a business programmer. But the more I got into creating games or puzzles, I guess, the more I wanted to do that. And it took me many, many years, but about 15 years ago, I got lucky and finally got to a company that let me do a design of a Mahjong game. And I designed it and coded it, et cetera. And that led me 5 years later to totally go on my own and do what I do now, which I love. So long story, but that's it. And I didn't know until 2 years after I graduated. So
I think it's a good point too about both the teaching stuff you were talking about, and then Zane, the educational games, of like seeing something out there and being like, this seems really cool, but I think I can do it better, as like a driving force behind picking kind of what you want to do.
Even then, we had good examples. Like Oregon Trail was a great example of an educational game that was done well, especially for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But there was just a plethora of stuff that was
yeah, of like, I can get into this field and like do things really well.
Okay. What's the best way to start designing a game? And how long does it usually take?
can I start on this one?
Yeah.
Okay, the best way to do it is the Nike system, which is just do it. Just do it. And start doing it every day. I worked, I am old, I'm 62 now, but back when I was 33-ish and learning C, I decided, again, to write my first game to learn C. And I worked 40 hours a week, and I had an hour commute each way. And I still spent at least 20 hours a week on that game for about 2.5 years, till I released it and it made exactly zero money. The thing was, that game today, with all the tools, I probably could have done, in 3 or 4 months. But back then, it was just a grind. But I was learning as I was going. You learn everything. I was learning geometry. I was writing my own lines. I mean, it's just insane, the stuff you had to do. I just love the tools today. Anyways, just do it. And really, most of the tools are free for a while until you figure out something that'll actually make money. So I don't know, and find a group to hang out with, because there's no good books that really walk you through the way. Back in the day, you could learn a programming language by leafing through a book and learning all the things you needed to know. There's just too much out there. You got to find a group to hang out with that's doing stuff. That's why the game jams are great. But you really just got to do it. And I would say at least an hour a day. Cut back on the Netflix and chill about 5%, and you got a game in 6 months. But you got to do it every day. Okay, I'm done.
Dakota?
Oops, I'll definitely reiterate the just do it attitude, because I have a lot of plans and documents and designs for games that are never going to see the light of day because it's just me writing stuff down that I think would be cool. And all of the most successful game projects and even things I've had the most fun with are me saying, like, I want to try out this particular game mechanic, and taking, a day or two to see if I can build that thing. And then if it's fun and catches my interest, expand beyond that, at least in my own like personal independent games. For something that has, for like client work, it probably needs a little bit more structure up front and planning. But for any of my own stuff, yeah, it's definitely move forward with it. And I've made things in, 24 or 48 hours that are fun. Might not call them a fully fledged game, but they're fun experiences compared to, fully developed, released games that can take 9 months to a year and a half, depending on the project scope.
Okay.
And if I can jump in, just to expand on that, the two things that Joe was saying and the just do it mentality, it has to start with a concept. Like Dakota said, like you have to have that kind of nugget of an idea. From my experience, I've explored kind of the general game design stuff with books and tutorials and whatnot, but nothing is going to drive that motivation more than having an idea, because I've just struggled. If you try to learn it by the books, by the tutorials, you'll just get overwhelmed with information. And I think it's better to know where you want to go or have an idea, and then learn what tools you need, what tools you need, and what skills you need to get there. But to answer like the overall question, I don't think there's a right way to design a game, and I think it can take, like Dakota said, it can take 48 hours, like during a game jam, or it can take 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
So I somewhat agree with it's a very nebulous thing to going out and making a game, but there are kind of patterns that one can follow to help you along. The first is ideation, and I think you, Matt, covered that pretty well. Getting ideas is a unique deal. Consuming media and following your own interests or your own personal experience. And I'm sorry, I've got yard work happening right outside my window now. But the second step to that is prototyping, especially if we're talking about moving towards a full game and getting designs down. Like, get your ideas down on paper and get something together really quickly. I personally like doing board game mock-ups for prototyping. They're quick, they're easy, they don't take nearly as much time as actually a lot of times programming out a prototype. Sometimes that can be good depending on the subject. That's the deal. All of this is very nebulous. But get a prototype, and that will tell you whether or not your idea is fun, and will save you a lot of time moving forward if it's not fun. Because you investing a ton of time and energy in something that wasn't going to work in the first place is just, you might have learned something, and that is an important thing, especially starting out. And it's okay to make mistakes, but once that's how people learn. But you want to make mistakes quickly and understand those mistakes as fast as you can so that you can correct them. But as far as like actually, now we are in the process of making the game beyond like full design. It very much varies. It depends on the size of your team. It depends on your idea. Joe, what's the quickest you've gotten a puzzle game out by yourself? It's been like 3 or 4 months, right?
Okay, so that's a misnomer. Clutter's not a puzzle. I mean, I've done it in a weekend.
See,
new mechanic, for sure.
Right. And I think the point that I'm trying to get across is, some games you can accomplish incredibly quickly, depending on the size of your team, what the idea is. Other games, if you have a huge idea, it's going to take a whole lot of time. It's going to take years. I think that was also brought up by Matt, 5, 6 years. Figure out what you want to do. I wouldn't recommend having a 5-year game as your first game. I much rather recommend putting it in the scope of like 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, if you're going to learn from mistakes,
Right.
a 6-month mistake is much easier to stomach than a 5-year one.
Right.
Yeah, and
So
I want to jump in here. So I design almost totally on the fly. What I want to do is I almost always think of a real world problem or something I've already seen, and I want to mimic it on the computer, and then I want to make the computer do stuff that you can't do easily in the real world.
right, but there's real life inspiration.
Correct. But all I care about is good enough. You know, I get the original mechanic for Clutter was written in a weekend, and it was written to appeal to the people that like hidden object games. And I wrote this level that the prototype took me maybe 2 or 3 hours, and it took me 20 minutes to play that very first level, and I loved it. And I knew immediately it wasn't the game, but I knew it's like a sandbox, right? It's the playground's rich enough that I could see tons of things I wanted to do with it. And I don't write down a lot of things unless they're really important. I just try to implement them and start playing and playing and playing. And Clutter over the years is more like clay. You start with the lump, you know, and that's what I do. And I constantly keep the notion of bang for the buck. Because I get 50 ideas in a day, but if an idea is going to take me 3 days to decide whether it's good enough, it's probably not even going to get done. Whereas if I can do something in 5 minutes and go, oh, not only will it work if it works, but I can actually cross it with all my other ideas. It's not a standalone, right? Then that's real huge bang for the buck, because now instead of that one, you've got that one times the 12 variations you already have, kind of a thing. So it, you know, you do that, and the rest has just been, you know, it's just, there's just too many ideas. So I try to code every day. That's the big thing. If I don't code or at least do that next level, then I've lost a day. So I don't want to think, and I don't want to write down things beyond a certain point.
And there is another good point. You talk about quick execution of ideas so that you can stick with them. You get a good idea, stick with it. Don't dither. If you know you've got a good idea, stick with it. But I'm done for now, so that we can carry on.
Okay. What are things you did in college that you think best pursued you for best pursued I'm sorry, that best presented you for your job, prepared you for your job? Dakota.
Okay.
Zane, you want to go?
Go ahead, Dakota.
Okay.
If you've got something.
Yeah, I was mostly gonna say I experimented with my college assignments, possibly to the annoyance of my professors at some point. But like I said, I went to school for design, so toward my junior and senior years, I ended up finding every excuse I could to turn all of my design projects into an excuse to build a website or make some fun interactive thing to play with. And that was helpful for me, not only because I was kind of figuring out what I like doing on a regular basis, but also it was the one thing that would keep me, and Joe, to your point, coding as much as possible. As I found in college, when I started those side projects, there was so much other schoolwork that I had to focus on that they would fall by the wayside. But if I made a school assignment an interactive project, I had a hard deadline and a grade on the line that would motivate me to actually finish it in some form or another. So yeah, I guess bending the rules was one of the things that best prepared me.
So losing my scholarship.
Intriguing.
It taught me that so if you have a little time to mess around, you can really procrastinate and get nothing done, et cetera, et cetera. And my grades didn't slip horribly, but enough that I lost my scholarship, which was mostly 80% aid. And when I checked into it, they said to get it back, you had to do this, this, and this. So the following semester, my junior year, I took an extra course, had a girlfriend for the first time, actually learned ping pong, went from one of the worst players to actually decent because of learning that I didn't have to be a slammer. And I started working 20 hours a week at UPS. And I found out when you have no time, you really, you become efficient. And I liked it. And believe it or not, that's the biggest lesson I think I got out of college, because I love math, but I don't use that much. I fell in love with the Rubik's Cube, but that had nothing to do with college. That was a year after college. It was that experience of, oh, I blew it. How do you recover? And then learning these habits that were just, as much as I ramble, I hate wasting time. How about I'll end with that. So
to Dakota's point about bending the rules, one of the things that I did in college that best prepared me was that for our senior project at DeVry, we were told to get into groups of 3 to 4 to take a single semester to make our senior projects. Well, my entire graduating class said, forget that. We started working on our senior project the whole 6 months before we were supposed to start the class as a team of 12. And we told all of the administration that, look, we're doing this thing. You can't really stop us. And it was the entire graduating class. I think maybe 3 people weren't part of our team, part of that graduating class, and like that's just what it was. Like we're doing what you want us to do. We're making a game. We're making a serious full conversion mod of a game, and at the time that was a pretty common way to get into the industry. So I learned a ton about programming and working together as a team, and all of the different team building aspects and who's doing what tasks and how to program and how to do some art. And it was a great learning experience, and each of us walked away with something that made us a lot stronger. The other deal from that is that we were one of the first student groups to display anything at Siege ever. It was a wonderful experience and really prepared each of us for being in the industry, because out of that graduating class, I believe 2 of us have voluntarily decided to not be part of the industry, and one other person, I'm not sure what happened to them, but like 75% of that graduating class now works in the industry. Until very recently, all of them were in the Atlanta area, but a few have moved on at this point.
Okay.
We broke the rules to our own benefit.
And got a ton of game project management experience as well, which is huge.
So I'm trying to think of anything to add to this. I'm hearing some themes of time management and hitting deadlines. Those are all super important. College is the time to make those mistakes. Like Joe. Just don't be afraid to screw up. And as far as something that I did, being in an art school, we had so many different people interested in so many different things, and everybody's a little cross-disciplined. Everybody, the game people were always a little interested in visual arts and other things. Everybody just kind of blends into each other. So just exploring as many avenues of creativity or technology that you can while you're in college, I think is a huge thing. I was on, I ended up working in games, but during college I was, working on a documentary about racehorses and teaching other people and mixing sound at local clubs and stuff like that. Just getting out and kind of trying out what you might want to make into a career, because that's the time that you can just kind of play around. It's like a sandbox.
Okay. Are there any other key skills that aren't obvious, that aren't available or usually tasked in a class? Target in a classroom?
Something that I didn't learn. This is specifically for, well, I guess, I don't know. You all can speak to this because I know you've all worked on other projects that were collaborative, but maybe not exactly a video game. But learning how to work with others via source control, version control, I think is a huge thing that we didn't learn at all in school, and I had to pick up very quickly. And that's where you can make some mistakes.
I will say real quick, Matt, that many universities are beginning to pick up on this. This is something that has been a large complaint of the industry for a long time. I know I had to learn version control basically on the job. But some universities, especially those around Atlanta, are beginning to hear that and start getting their students to like submit assignments through version control. So it's beginning to happen.
That's great. Yeah, that's awesome to hear. But just on top of that, to like, learning how to be appropriate in a Slack environment or Discord or whatever, Microsoft Teams, just collaboration and all those soft skills. That was something I didn't get a ton of.
Yeah, I will say that like being able to pick up new skills and do research in Google effectively is really useful, because I mean, like you said, there's no matter how much you learn at school, whatever job you're going to go into is going to have their own system of doing things that you're going to have to pick up on and get up to speed really quick. So being able to pick up a new language or methodology and not be afraid to dive into something new has been way more helpful than just about any other skill.
This one kind of goes back to some soft skills, but a little humility. An issue that I've found a little bit out of people that are pretty good in their class first coming into a work setting is that they've been used to being an all-star for their group and community. And then they basically move into the next tier and they don't necessarily recognize that they're not as much of an all-star as they think or have been led to believe while they were in college. It's my experiences with this have not been serious, and they've been few. But me being in a bit of a management position has been a thing that I am acutely aware of. So having a little humility, recognizing that when you get into a workplace environment, that there are going to be people with more experience than you, and I'm not saying that having that lack of experience just makes you like not good or not wrong. Like you're still good. You may still be right. It's just recognizing that some people have seen the things that you're talking about before and know how to solve them and are able to guide you down paths a little bit quicker than you would have been able to on your own. And it may be that you may teach a senior person something new. So if you absolutely know something, hold strong to your convictions, but even then take that with a grain of salt. Use data to back up who is more correct or has the more efficient means or whatever. Use data, but be willing to accept that someone else may know more than you.
Yeah, I can't echo that enough. You need to stay humble.
Okay, so I want to thank the other three panels for explaining exactly why I'm an indie dev. Humble's tough. So I came into the industry, I came not into the game industry, but just programmer. And I came into a shop where everybody was 2, 3, 5 years experience. And I immediately started solving problems that they couldn't solve for 2 years. We won't go into that, but I quickly came up with what I call my thumb theory of programming. And some programmers are thumbs and a lot of them are fingers. And unfortunately, an organization only needs one thumb because thumbs don't usually get along. They like to do the thumb war. Regardless of that, the best lesson I finally grokked in my adult life after college was that business cares less about your talent and more about your ability to get along. So you guys are right, but you can also make a choice, which is what the choice I eventually made, which was I'm better off not being a hired gun, not answering to anybody, etc. So There's always a path. And yeah, I'm not the most humble guy in the world, but I also appreciate talent still. So it's a fine line. Right, Zane?
Yep.
That's a good point too. Like recognizing how best you work is also a skill in of itself. To be like, this is not a good environment for me, and no matter how hard I try, it's probably not going to work out. So, trying to figure out how you best.
Yeah, and that was definitely true. I got lucky. I worked for iWin for 5 years and got my first shot at doing a bigger game, but the art director there drove me nuts, and I had this game half greenlit that they then pulled the plug on, and my wife asked me if I could do it by myself. And that's the first time I really thought about doing it by myself. And I said, not quite the game, but close enough. And man, that's the best decision I ever made. So, you got to find your own path. And rolling, you should get along with people. But one of the mistakes I made as an adult is I got into a job. It's the only job I got laid off from. And when I think of it in hindsight, it's because I overreacted to my take no prisoners mentality. There was a guy there that I should have eaten alive, and I didn't, because the prior job, after 6 years, I had dug myself a hole for not being the humble get along guy. So I went the other extreme and tolerated this guy too long. And when the layoffs came, he got picked over me, and it was, I thought, a poor decision. And I don't think it would have happened if I was the old Joe at that point. I think they would have easily picked me, because he wasn't, there is talent. Talent does matter, but you do have to get along too. And I think, eventually you get to balance both, which I think I did at some point, even though, like I said, I'm happy being an indie. Done with that.
Okay. My other question is, what are some challenges? Oh, wait, I skipped the question. What are the best ways to network in your industry?
So this is basically my bread and butter. I'm going to start, and we'll see if I forget anything. There are several different organizations around the city of Atlanta that do regular meetups. There is the Unity meetup. I think the full name is the Atlanta Unity Users Meetup Group. There is the Unreal Meetup Group. You can find both of those on Meetup. There is the
Discord.
XR Meetup Group. There is, I think that's XR Atlanta Meetup. And then there is the Atlanta VR and AR Users, which are two different meetups. There is the Georgia Game Developers Association. There is the International Game Developers Association. So those are just different organizations that have regular meetings. Taking part in game jams, and those are more professional. I'm sure individual schools have their own. Very specifically for GSU, there are the Panther Hackers and the Aurora Game Development Club. If you are at a different school and watching this, look up what your local schools do. Lots of schools have their own clubs and game jams and things like that. I started getting into conventions. Even though these are very fan convention based, there is an industry side to it. People go and peddle their wares at MomoCon and DreamHack and DragonCon. Definitely participate in those. And you can even participate not just as a sole game developer, designer, participating them as like cosplay or a streamer or something else along those lines. If you are influencing with that media, it is both entertainment for you and also being part of the industry. Participating in game jams. The Global Game Jam is held at 3 different sites, typically in Atlanta, one at KSU, one at GSU, and one at SCAD Savannah. SCAD Atlanta, because Savannah also has their own site for Global Game Jam. You can participate in that. A unique thing that the Georgia Game Developers Association does for the Global Game Jam is they have the best in Georgia, where each site has their own voting process to figure out who creates the best game for that game jam, and then goes into a finalist round where they are given mentors, where they are given prizes that help them get their game out to market. I do want to point out that GSU for the past 2 years has been the winner for the Best in Georgia. At least one of the teams that got awarded Best in Georgia was from GSU. That has gone on to allow them to continue to make their game and have it shown off at the conventions that I mentioned earlier, like MomoCon and DreamHack. I mentioned the Athens Game Jam, which I did post the link for Athens Game Jam in the web chat. That is being held the 24th to 26th. We're doing it online only this go around because, well, you know, everybody's on lockdown. Keep in mind, it's the first time we're attempting to do this like solely online, so we're probably going to have hiccups, but we're trying to give it a go. I highly recommend participating in any game jam that you can, because game jams are a great opportunity for people with new skills or wanting to get into it to try out for the first time. People wanting to learn new skills, even if you've been a dev for 10 years. They are great places to try out new skills in a safe environment. Most game jams are pretty open to people that are new or trying to learn something new to participate. It's a safe place to try something new, ultimately. The first time one gets the opportunity to, it's something I recommend at this point, is also recognizing that it's very expensive for people to do so in current situations, and limiting that. Try to go to GDC or other, I highly recommend going to GDC, but you can also go to other nearer conferences. And a test run for that might be the East Coast Games Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina. They hold that in the spring every year. I am speaking on these things, barring the whole COVID-19 situation presently, and I'm assuming that everything will go back to normal next year. But definitely try and make it out to GDC as soon as you can. I recognize it's expensive. I recognize that it's limiting. The IGDa and other different organizations have scholarships for getting people with disabilities or from minority background or disadvantaged backgrounds, getting grants and scholarships to be able to go. Past your first go to GDC, I would highly recommend not going again until you have a clear objective. But I do believe that GDC is so large and so much that you're not going to be able to get a firm objective for the second time you go until the first time you have gone. It is the epicenter of our industry and is where the majority of like larger business deals happen. So with that, I'll open up the floor to other guys. Did I miss anything?
I'll just jump in that's just the flip side of the Nike Do It. It's show up. I run my own meetup, which I'm not sure you mentioned or not, because
I did not.
You mentioned the Unity one, but the oldest game dev meetup in Atlanta was started by a guy named Brad Merritt, who is a producer down at Cartoon Network. And about 3 years ago, I think he made me a co-chair and made it sort of my meetup. And that happened because I made a conscious choice to show up every freaking time and be the one central point of that meetup. After it sort of used to be this co-IGDA one way back in the day when Thrust had offices and stuff. But when that stopped happening, I decided to become the central thing of it. And it's my meetup. I try to let people do whatever they want to do, but you know, I made that happen because I decided to show up. And same way with game jams and everything else Zane mentioned, you know, you got to be consistent. You got to be a face they see. 8 years ago or 8 or 9 years ago now, I think I made the choice to always to not only go to that one, but to Siege and the GGDA meetups. I rarely miss one of those just because I wanted to be more involved.
Can you explain Siege? Because I also missed that one in the talk.
Right,
I went from
Siege is a 3-day, very mini version of Game Developers Conference, really. It's a really small, local, about 1,500 people used to show up. It's gotten a little smaller over the years. But I ended up falling in love with the first one I went to. And then I think 2 years later, they finally let me speak. And a couple of years after that, I became a regular doing rants. And I think last year they made me an official member of the Siege team, which I'd been fighting for a couple of years. So just show up. The power of you showing up is truly amazing. So, and try to remember people's names. That's the other tip I'll give people. If you can remember a person's name, the second time you see them, it'll amaze them.
So I think to piggyback off of that is if you feel like there isn't a thing that you are interested in the game industry that caters to you, make it. Right, Joe?
And I want to name drop just a couple of audio specific ones. There is Audio Gang, Game Audio Network Guild, and they are pretty much coupled with GDC, so they have a big showing there. Then there's AES, the Audio Engineering Society. They have a chapter here in Atlanta, I believe. And then there's also the Women's Audio Mission. And you can just, if you just Google those, any of those will show up. And those are all great places to network. And to Zane's point about what's going on in the world right now, there are also a lot of great Slack and Discord channel or teams and servers that you can join. And I believe the Unity and the Unreal clubs both have one on Discord, which is also a great way too for those that may be a little bit more introverted. I've had some social anxiety in the past. I know how that goes. It's not always the easiest thing to go and meet people in person. So introducing yourself in an online setting might be a good way to start.
All right.
Okay. Hold on for a second. Joe, you mentioned there were free programs for designing games. Can you name a few of them?
Sure. Unity, Blender, right?
Yep.
All free. Tools are just most of the tools are free unless you start making money with them. I won't say most, but definitely Unity is a great one to learn. I don't know what it is with UE4. I thought it was the same. It's also free, right?
It is free up until you legit start making money.
Right.
I think it's $10,000 in revenue.
Unity, you don't have to pay for until you make 100,000, something like that. You have to keep their logo in it, but that's about it. And it's really the full set of tools. I mean, there's very little limits they impose on them. And again, Blender, I believe, is the good one the artists use that's free. I actually, use an old tool that I paid for, but and a lot of other things are free. I mean, my editor is free that I use. I use a Unity shell that's useful. I don't pay for just about anything anymore, other than, again, I pay for my Unity license because I actually do make money. So
most things also have student licenses.
Yeah.
The ones that you would have to pay for, but really they're expecting large companies to pay for. And
Right.
so they have the student licenses for those. It's not free, but one that I recommend as an alternative to Photoshop, especially if you're no longer a student, is Clip Studio. It has a very similar interface to Photoshop and does vector and raster graphics. I believe it's usually $80 for a one-time purchase. And they have sales like 2 or 3 times a year that bring the price down to like 25. So it's not going to break the bank, especially not like a recurring subscription that Photoshop would. It's not free, but definitely better than recurring fees.
There's also Game Maker Studio that's suited more towards 2D sprite-based games, but I'm just looking on here, free 30-day trial, and the licenses are very affordable.
Yeah, Game Maker's pretty good. As far as web-based games go too, a lot of those tools are free as well. And Phaser is generally a pretty decent one to start out with. That said, given the choice, if I'm making strictly a game without constraints, I like working in Unity, probably the best.
Yeah, and I'll add, I mean, so years ago, I had to make a decision on a compiler. And the two at the time were QuickC by Microsoft and Borland's. And anybody I talked to just loved whatever they were using, and that was about it. It was almost like a religious war. And then somebody said to me, you know, if you're trying to decide between the two, ask yourself this: which one are you sure is going to be around in 5 years and that your time investment in it is going to pay off? And for me, that meant the only two I considered was Unity and UE4. And because of the local community and the game devs I knew, it was an easy choice to go with Unity. And I've never regretted that choice. And I think anybody in high school or college or whatever that wants to just start playing around can't go wrong. You know,
Which, kind of to that, I don't know about Unreal's lessons and all of that, but definitely Unity, much of their stuff throughout the pros and cons of coronavirus, right? Everything for Unity Learn is free right now throughout the duration of the coronavirus. So yeah, if you want to learn how to use Unity using some of their premium Learn modules, like now's the time to do it because they're free.
Okay, I have
wait, one last thing. And because I don't think anybody's really said it. I mean, we've said it, just do it, right? But you really can't learn game dev without just doing it. So start. You can't bypass. You hear about the 10,000 hours of mastery? That's to get your foot wet in the pool. Okay, so you need to start playing around with the tools and everything, or you're going to be immediately behind. If you really want to do this, this is your space. And it's a little different. I know people that pick up painting and they're great at it. You know, they have some natural ability or something, and they're awesome in a little while, even though there's 10,000 mastery there. But there is a learning curve to all new tools, and you can be really good. You can be that thumb, but it's time. Time spent in that freaking tool or whatever is the only thing that gets you better. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, I have a question from social media. If I wanted to become a video game developer, do I also have to know 3D modeling?
So yeah, I see everyone shaking their head. The quick answer is no. If you're wanting to be a programmer, no, you don't need to learn 3D modeling. If you're wanting to be a 2D artist, it depends on the size of the company. But the larger the company is, the more specialized they want people, so you're probably never going to touch 2D. The smaller the size of the company, the more generalist they want you to be. And generalist doesn't mean just knowing a little bit of everything. It's like having 2 or 3 really good skills. So if you're going to be audio, you're never ever going to touch 3D modeling, right, Matt?
Correct. Yes,
So,
I have never.
so I mean, it just depends on what your desired skill set is. And I will point this out. We've talked a lot about art and audio. There are other skills that are required to make a game company function, such as being a lawyer or being an accountant or being in HR. Now, those jobs are fewer and far between, but they do exist. And as a company gets larger, game companies do need those specializations. And sometimes, like especially with law, need it to be very specialized towards video game knowledge. So this is a way that if you don't have these math or art skills, you can do other things to get into the industry. I'm sure this talk is primarily dedicated towards art, audio, and programmers, but just want to throw that out there.
And QA.
Yeah.
Yep.
People got to
Yep.
quality
Everyone.
test
Yep.
the game.
Everyone thank your QA engineers.
Yes.
I will say, even if you don't, the most helpful thing that I found is even if you don't know how to 3D model or make your 2D art or make the music that's going in your game or program it, it's always helpful if you're working on a team to at least have somewhat of an awareness, just so that you can communicate effectively between people. So even if you can't physically make a character, model it, and move, if you know enough to use the right terminology, it really helps smooth things along. But you don't actually have to be doing any of that stuff if you don't want to.
How important are math and physics?
If you are a programmer, particularly a gameplay programmer, they're pretty important. Not gonna say the end all be all. You need to understand your coding better, but they're important. Even artists in games use a certain degree of math. It's a different type of math. It's math for art. But like your hardcore physics and trigonometry is not going to be nearly as required for an artist. But you're going to have to understand like the mathematics behind color. I mean, that's still an element of math. I imagine, I don't know because I'm not an audio person, there are, like, audio has its own set of math that is required for understanding.
Absolutely. Yeah, I need to know curves for fades and things like that. Trigonometry, a little bit of trig.
So it's an important part of game development. I often tell people that developing a game is the third most difficult type of software that can be made. The first is rocket science. It is incredibly hard, lots of physics, and people can die. The next is life critical systems, things that go into like making sure our traffic lights function, making sure right now like hospital equipment functions. That is difficult because people can die. The one thing about video games, it is both of those things, except if you make a mistake, it's highly unlikely that someone will die.
I'm going to dissent a little bit. Algebra 2. If you've got a kid that's decent at Algebra 2, and if you remember the days of factoring, a 5x, polynomial equation, that's about it. If you're only doing, 2D stuff and logic systems, etc. Now, yeah, if you're getting into the motion and 3D and some other stuff, but usually you'll learn whatever specific you need to solve that one problem. And most of the really hard stuff is done in the underlying code anyways now. You raycast in Unity and it does most of the heavy lifting for you. I always said if you got somebody who was decent at algebra, you could turn them into a good programmer. And I'm gonna stick with that feeling. So.
I'll join you on that a little bit, considering I have an art degree and I'm doing games programming on a regular basis. That said, I'm not building Breath of the Wild, and anytime I have to calculate something on a circle, it always ends up being pretty frustrating and challenging. But I didn't do any hardcore physics classes and some fairly basic math classes in college. So yeah, it is very specific to the games that you're making, and you can get away without serious math equation knowledge.
I think spreadsheets are more important than math.
Yeah.
I use so many spreadsheets every day. That's what you need to know. Just learn how to use Google Sheets and learn how to use it very well.
Okay, we're running out of time, but are you guys free for one more live question?
Yeah.
Sure.
What games should all developers play?
Everyone likes different things, and there are a plethora of genres out there. I do distinguish, at least for myself, games for research versus games for entertainment. There's a little bit of overlap on my games for actual research because they're the type of things that I like to play anyway, and so it's the things that I want to make. There's too many games and too many genres out there. Everyone who likes something different, and everyone thinks that they see something they enjoy and they believe that they can make it better, and that is art, and that's what drives art forward.
I have a specific example. I think if you haven't, you should play Limbo. For a couple reasons, but I'm skewing this towards the audio. It has phenomenal sound design, and also if you are into, I believe it was made with Unity, could be wrong on that. But if you go to the Audio Kinetic site, which is they make Wise, an audio middleware product, you can actually download the entire project of Limbo and tinker with it and replace your own sounds and learn the building blocks of the sound design of that game as you play it, and it's totally interactable. But you know, beyond the audio, the game is just phenomenal in terms of atmosphere and art and design. I think that's a good one that everybody should play.
I'm gonna throw my vote in for Sayonara Wild Hearts, which is available on most every platform I can find: mobile, Steam, Switch, which is what I play it on. And it is, I find, a great example of a short but well polished game that touches a lot of different things. So Matthew, you might actually enjoy this because it is very much an audio album based game.
Yeah, I've played about 5 minutes of it, so but I want to hear more.
I've played many hours of it, and it's got like the music is a core part of it, and that ties into how you move through the UI. The UI pulses with that music. It's an arcade game, so there is challenge to it, but it has systems in place to let you skip over difficult parts. So it kind of gives you a great example of a sliding difficulty curve without picking easy, medium, or hard. And yeah, everything, there are different individual levels that kind of play with one mechanic and then dismiss them for the rest of the game, but the whole game still has some systems in place that are common throughout. So it's just a great example of how you can do variation, tight integration between different systems in something that's not a very long game, but has a lot of replayability.
Okay. The last question that I have is, how can I get into the industry as a technical artist? What is a good way to showcase my skills as a technical artist?
This isn't just for technical artists. This is for everyone. Have a portfolio. Now, if you're looking for specific things, it somewhat depends on what you are interested in, because there's many different realms into the technical art field, especially as you get to bigger company specialization. But a good example would be like if you've written your own tools to allow for something like, placing vegetation in a realistic way. That would be a good thing to show in a portfolio. If you have created a tool that allows one to quickly and easily rig many different skeletons, or you've written a way to automatically convert different animation profiles to different skeletons, like these are good examples of stuff that I would look for in a technical artist. If anyone else has,
I'm going to jump in. So not only make your portfolio, but then make sure you present your portfolio correctly. Think of it as a marketing item. Spend a lot of time deciding what they should see first, make it easy to jump to different things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not just a lump of your work that people sift through, okay? Back in the day, it was make a game. Now it's make several games. And again, make it easy for them to check out. And by the way, Free Cell was my game.
There's a website, I'm trying to find it. It's left my head, but I know that it's a site that most technical artists and effects artists put their stuff on Does anybody know the name of this site off the top of their head? But anyway, I know that a lot of developers will hire people straight off of that website. I'll have to try to find it and link it later.
I feel like I know what you're talking about. ArtStation.
That sounds possibly right.
That's definitely a place to put up artwork that people do actually like look at that are in the industry.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, to the point, it just have a portfolio in general is.
Yeah, and having a way that people can find, stumble across something you've done that says, where they can say, this is an interesting tool or execution of something that we need that matches our style. That having that variety out there and easy for people to find is probably the most effective way.
Following up with Joe's statement about a good presentation, you're a technical artist, but you're still an artist, and I find it hard to forgive artists that don't have a good presentation of whatever work that they have. That is your job at the company, is to make the things look good. I can more easily forgive a programmer for not having something that looks pretty. But definitely if you are an artist of any kind, your stuff should be branded. It should look good. There should have been thought and reasoning into a narrative of your own work. Absolutely.
And as far as websites go, if you know web development, you, like I was once, may be tempted to write code your own portfolio site, even as like a side project of like, hey, maybe I can do this. I would recommend just picking up something like Squarespace and focusing more on having a clean video reel and write-ups on those things, because you don't want to lose out on a job because your site didn't load because you forgot to do something when you were coding it at 2 a.m. Ask me how I know.
I did the exact same thing, Dakota. I was like, I'm gonna make this from scratch. I want to learn this, and it just bit me in my butt. So
I want to jump back just for 2 seconds of the favorite game. And I already mentioned Free Cell, but what I want to point out is, regardless of whatever favorite game or whatever games you're checking out, there's 2 ways you can think about your game in comparison. And one sucks and one is what you should be doing. So the one that sucks is, I can make a Mario runner with, we'll make, it'll be all rabbits instead of Mario. That idea sucks, okay? But if you sit there and go, God, why, it's always that same level. What can I do to programmatically do it different or add more randomness, or, hey, what instead of the mushrooms doing this, what if, we have these things, and you think of 10 different things they don't even have in the game that would be cool to do within a runner. That's cool. Just skinning it and going, that's a great idea, is not where you should be thinking. So whatever game you want, look at, no matter how gorgeous it is and how great it is, and I'll use an example, Myst from back in the day, it was the game. But you know what I hated about Myst? I hated the fact that when you got to a great puzzle, like they had this log bridge that was a maze that was awesome. But when you're done it, you're done. You're done, and I hated it. Why can't I just go back and get a different log, log bridge? And that's what I care about. I care about making things random. Again, that's why Free Cell. I play Free Cell 30 minutes a day. And I wanted to create games that people will play forever. So that's what I focused in on. And as much as I loved Myst, I went, God, that sucks. I can only do that puzzle once. That's horrible. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you so much for telling us all this great things about video games and how to develop them and everything. And yeah.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm Puzzles by Joe. You can find my website. Anybody can, you always email me for follow-up questions or whatever. Whoever sees this anytime, even if it's 5 years down the road.
Yeah, I guess there's that. You can find out more information about the International Game Developers Association at IGDa.org. You other two want to have where you can get contacted?
I'm just at Matt Wesdock on Twitter. If you want to tweet at me, I'm not on there a lot. Or the game we're working on, I think it's just called scavengersgame.com. If you want to check out, we're doing play tests every few months or so. It's gonna be fun.
And you can see everything we're doing at Primal-Screen at primalscreen.com.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. And this is the end of the panel.
Thank you. We'll see
All
you guys later.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.